Hello and welcome to The Impact. I'm Mike McClanahan. 5 years ago, you wouldn't see betting information embedded in the graphics of a pro football game on a major network, but now it's routine. In 2018, the U.S. Supreme Court overturned a long-standing ban on sports betting that restricted legal wagers on sporting events to Nevada. Since then, more than 30 states, including Washington, have legalized sports betting in some form. Now, gambling information is integrated into mainstream professional sports coverage around the country. In Washington, sports betting is only legal on-site at one of Washington's tribal casinos. Tribes that want to offer sports wagering have to amend their gaming compact agreements with the state. The first legal sports wager placed in the state of Washington was made in September of 2021. The state's legal sports betting framework took effect in March of 2020 when the governor signed House Bill 2638. The new law followed a heated debate over whether sports betting should be allowed in Washington card rooms as well.
This bill that tribes are bringing forward is the bill that we need under federal law to be able to compact forward in the state. So I don't see this as an us versus them. I see this as an us together with the state.
You know, we came out, we tried to propose thoughtful legislation that would just include us, allow us to compete, pay taxes, generate probably around $50 million annually across this state. And instead, we end up with a legislation that excludes us, even hangs an emergency clause, which, you know, I think is very, on its face, doesn't smell right.
While a number of states allow mobile sports betting through smartphone apps anywhere within state lines, Washington has one of the strictest online gambling prohibitions in the country. Fantasy sports, office sports pools, and bracket pools are considered illegal gambling in Washington, too. There is one exception for 100-square sports pool boards, which were authorized under the 1973 Gambling Act. Still ahead, the director of the State Gambling Commission joins us to talk about some of the new regulatory issues that have arisen in the age of legal sports betting. That's next. Joining me now, Tina Griffin, director of the Washington State Gambling Commission. Tina, thank you for your time today. So, legal sports betting has been available for 2 years now in Washington, although confined to tribal casinos. The first tribal sportsbook opened in the fall of 2021. How many options are there today?
So we have 22 tribes that are operating 28 gaming facilities in the state currently, and 20 of the tribes have authorized sports wagering through their compact amendments. Today we have 16 tribes operating sports wagering, and 4 of those have mobile sports wagering. So the others then will have on-premise wagering at kiosks or at their sports book in terms of a retail counter, and then the other 4 have both on-premise. Mobile sports wagering can only occur on-premise only at those tribes as well. So,
and that's an interesting note there too. Given the mainstream coverage that you see of sports betting now, and then all the advertisements for some companies that have been out there for ages, fantasy sports companies, that sort of thing. You even see lines on betting odds sometimes displayed on the same graphic with the score and the teams when you're watching a pro football game. But Washington does not allow online gambling except under very specific circumstances. Can you kind of talk about that?
Certainly. So the legislature in 2020, through the bill authorizing sports wagering for the tribes, set it up so that the wagering would only occur on the tribal lands at the gaming facilities through compact. And so like every state, because we have a majority of the states at this point now offering sports wagering or authorizing sports wagering, every state has taken a different approach. And Washington's approach is for the tribes to offer that activity through a compact amendment, and so each tribe can have a different amended compact staying within the parameters of what was set forth with the legislation. And mobile wagering can occur, but only on the tribal property at the gaming facility only.
Can you talk a little, I know you've got an enforcement background too here.
Yes.
What are the penalties in the law for illegal online wagering?
Yes, so we do have some pretty tough penalties, so felonies for participating as a player, especially if you're, and long time have been in place. Obviously, sports wagering has occurred illegally up until 2020, but yes, penalties for those people who are as a felony, for those people who are offering sports wagering and taking wagers on their own, as well as then penalties, criminal penalties for those involved in the event, such as players and coaches and referees in terms of making wagers, et cetera. So, as well as match fixing. All of those things were part of the bill, and things that we want to make sure that in the offering of sports wagering, we're still protecting the integrity of the game and still protecting the players in terms of any manipulation, as well as information sharing. It becomes very similar to like insider trading. If you were to receive information of a player's potential injury prior to any formal announcement, that certainly is something that needs to be controlled to prevent the lines from changing.
So a lot of information there, a lot of, I guess, pressure for the athletes, maybe the people involved in the programs, and I want to expand on that in a minute, but just from a strict parameters and a framework standpoint, does the law have prohibitions about events, particularly college events in college schools? Kind of what are some of the, I don't know, the boundaries, I guess, the sidelines for this?
Certainly. So not only is mobile wagering authorized, but yet restricted in terms of where it can be authorized. So there are prohibitions, like I indicated, as to who can wager and then what those criminal penalties are. But as you indicated, there is also a requirement, or excuse me, the authorized activities, the authorized sporting events, so to speak, would be professional sports, collegiate sports, Olympic and international sports, and esports. But then the prohibition is no wagering on in-state collegiate events, no wagering on high school or youth sports or minor league sports. So those are the parameters in terms of the events for wagering.
When you look at this issue and you look at other, counterpart agencies in other states, sort of the trends, the issues that are being watched, what are some of the types of scenarios that maybe have come to light now that sports wagering has become more mainstream or become more available, related to either player influence or even, harassment, that sort of thing?
Yes, so that has really started to come to light is player intimidation and concerns, especially at the college level. I have been to conferences where that has been discussed, and the NCAA it's my understanding, is really focusing on making, checking the players' well-being because of the influence and pressure of the players receiving text messages, emails, et cetera. Hey, your shot, the shot that you missed at the last few seconds of the game cost me X number of dollars. And so just now the monetary value, where when we didn't have sports wagering so prevalent in the US, that pressure wasn't there as much as it is now. So there is the player intimidation factor that is more prevalent, or is becoming more prevalent, and how to deal with that in terms of the mental health of the players as well, and how they navigate that, as well as obviously monitoring what activities they can participate in if they do choose to wager, and really focusing on the responsible gaming programs for players, and making sure they understand what those prohibitions in the states are.
In states, as you mentioned, are taking a different approach to this. If you cross the border to Oregon, different situation.
Right. Each state, as they authorize sports wagering, takes a very different approach. And so Oregon, sports wagering is authorized in Oregon, and the Oregon State Lottery is the entity that runs the sports wagering. And I believe it's mobile only, statewide, but yes, the state does contract out then one provider who does do all the risk management, I believe, and offers the lines, et cetera. And that is something, there's quite a few different models. So there are a number of states in which the lottery is running the sports wagering activity of the state. There are others that are also like ours. There's with tribal only authorization. And then there are other states that have authorized commercial, tribal, et cetera. So some that just do retail only, some that do mobile statewide, et cetera. There's a vast difference amongst each state.
Is one of the goals, or at least maybe in some respects, to sort of push illegal activity related to gambling mainstream, to bring it into the light, regulate it, and then, have some modicum of control, maybe people more inclined to participate in something legal than illegal betting, which has, I guess, been under the radar apart from, the occasional bust here and there. What's your perspective on that?
Yes, so I've been with the commission for over 30 years, and so yes, we as an agency, the agency's been in existence for 50 years now, and I've worked cases in which I bet with a bookmaker, right, and made wagers on sporting events, et cetera. So sports wagering, we called it bookmaking, but sports wagering under the table has been, or off the mainstream, has been occurring for years, well back in within the 50 years that we've been here. That's why the laws are so strict, and that's why the laws have been on the books here for a number of years. This didn't all just come to light with the authorization of sports wagering. And so, yes, when you authorize an activity, the thought is that you're bringing regulation with that, and the hope is that you push people then from the illegal activity towards the legal activity, the more regulated market. And, as we've interacted with other states before sports wagering was authorized here in Washington, we did reach out to a number of other states, and they were experiencing that movement from the illegal to the legal markets. The illegal market will always exist in some capacity, but if rather than go into your neighborhood bookie, you're most likely going to get more stable lines. You're most likely to get paid on time and not have to worry if your book balanced his or her books over the weekend. So are they going to have the money to pay you, et cetera? And so there is a lot more protections moving towards the regulated market. But the illegal market continues to exist in some capacity.
A different aspect of the illegal market, offshore casinos, the online website, internet-based gambling from illegal offshore casinos had been an issue, a problem. I know specifically with online wagering, Washington has very strict penalties just specifically for that. But that also has been an issue in other states for sure, as far as access to the illegal market. Can you talk about how enforcement groups are addressing those challenges?
Right, and so other states, as they are authorizing this new activity, tend to have very high tax rates associated with the sports wagering activity. And so they're using this as a funding mechanism. And for those states in particular, they have a much higher interest in making sure that the activity stays within the legal framework that was authorized. But this is felt from all of us in terms of states that have authorized sports wagering, and they are offshore entities operating these bookmaking websites. So yes, there has been asks, there have been letters sent, and we've tried to engage as states, the federal authorities, on help, because we need help with trying to combat this offshore enterprise. Respectively, each state's jurisdiction lies within the state, obviously not offshore. So it is a federal issue that we're all working to see if we can't come to resolution.
Is it difficult to, I mean, you just indicated that it is, but what are some of the challenges to enforcing or combating that? Just from maybe a resources standpoint or from a jurisdictional standpoint, are there various different obstacles to, unlike busting up something physical located here in Washington?
Right, if the entity is located here in Washington, then certainly our jurisdiction, we have no issues with that, right? We have statewide jurisdiction because we're a limited jurisdiction law enforcement agency that has responsibility to enforce the Gambling Act. So that's not an issue, but once it becomes beyond the state of Washington, even though the activity may be occurring here, our reach only goes within the boundaries of the state. So we do need other entities, other agencies to get involved. We can still handle, like I said, the situations where we have local books still in play. So yeah, we can and we do still proceed forward with trying to combat the illegal bookmaking that's occurring.
Is it typically a priority to go after individuals who are in Washington but betting illegally, not offering bets, but
Right. We historically have not gone after the players. That tends to be more of a misdemeanor, but really looking for the individual who is running the enterprise. Yes. Yeah.
So if you're watching a pro football game, these days, you might see some sort of betting related information at some point on the screen. Not just in the commercial breaks, but actually, on the lower third. For people that maybe have a problem with gambling or have experienced some challenges with gambling, is this new environment challenging? And if so, what sorts of resources has the state put into place to help people find help?
So yes, I think it's still relatively new. While we're starting to see more studies occurring, and in some states, as they legalize or make changes to what is authorized in terms of sports wagering, they're also indicating prevalent studies, or they'll have certain monies set aside for responsible gaming programs, problem gambling programs, and that is something, as we negotiated the compacts for sports wagering, it was outlined in the statute, as well as what we have in the agreed to with the tribes. So with the tribes, that they need to establish a problem gambling policy. When they're operating sports wagering, they need to have annual training for their employees to be able to recognize, detect, and most importantly, provide the resource material for those that are coming to them with problems, that have indicated they have a problem with gambling. How to go about signing them up for their self-exclusion program. So each tribe has their own self-exclusion program. And then if a tribe is operating a kiosk, the standalone machines that you can just interact and place your wager on, they're required to have a QR code or some sort of information that the player can easily access that will refer them to the that tribe's responsible gaming program. And so that's one thing that came about with the sports wagering authorization. But then just recently, we had in terms of the prevalence of sports wagering, those that have a problem with gambling in the state. In 2019, there was legislation that authorized a prevalency study, and we worked with the legislature to support that bill. And so that study was completed and was overseen by the state's problem gambling program run by the Healthcare Authority. And so we did get some information back. It had been a number of years from which we've had a study. And so that study was done right after the legislation was authorizing sports wagering, but I believe prior to sports wagering actually being up and running here in the state. So it will be interesting to see what sort of data in future studies, but along with that study, there was a final report from the Problem Gambling Task Force. In December of 2022, it made a number of recommendations to the legislature, and then Senator Conway, who was part of the Problem Gambling Task Force, which I should say was also chaired by our Vice Chair, Julia Patterson, so we did have an involvement, as well as lottery and horse racing, various members of the behavioral health community, gambling counselors, certified gambling counselors, tribes, and commercial entities. So all of that came about, and Senator Conway put a bill together really focusing on a few of the main points from that study. One being trying to address the treatment for co-occurring disorders that are usually associated with those that have a problem with gambling, as well as addressing the significant funding gap that we have in Washington. That was a significant finding of the study. So that increased the contributions that the lottery and commercial and nonprofit licensees pay towards, based on their gross gambling receipts. And so that went from 0.13% beginning July of this year to 0.2%, and then it will go to 0.26% on July 1st of 24. And so all of that is in an effort to provide more funding for the state program for problem gambling, and provide treatment for all state residents who encounter challenges with gambling.
And maybe have challenges paying for some of the treatment options too. We should mention too, there is a free helpline that's
Yes.
available.
Yes.
24 hours a day.
Yes.
So we are out of time. We'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much, Tina Griffin, Director of the Washington State Gambling Commission. We appreciate your perspective. A lot of stuff happening on that front.
Thank you.
The new legal status and much higher visibility of sports betting can create new risks for people who have struggled with gambling addiction. Recovery organizations say the shift has also opened the door to a new generation of potential problem gamblers. A 2020 analysis from the National Council on Problem Gambling found that sports bettors are at least twice as likely to have gambling problems as other types of bettors. The rate of gambling addiction nationwide has been estimated at 2 to 3%, but a 2016 report on problem gambling in Washington found the rate is likely closer to 4% in the state. Tens of thousands of people in Washington have some level of gambling problem. Estimates range from 85,000 to more than 200,000 depending on the source. The Evergreen Council on Problem Gambling runs a 24/7 helpline for people in crisis or people who just suspect something may be getting out of hand. The line is available to anyone, individuals, families, even employers who may be worried.
Seeing the odds and whatnot on sports betting, and the ads are pretty much omnipresent, can have a triggering effect. So what we do is, what we choose to do locally in Washington is focus on creating awareness on where resources are.
Watch The Impact on your own time at tvw.org or listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple, and other platforms. Follow us on X at The Impact TVW. That's a wrap for this week. Please join us next time for more in-depth interviews you won't find anywhere else. I'm Mike McClanahan. Thanks for watching. See you next time.